So preserving natural parks from mining by James Leon. So mining in the parks. So parks were opened up until mining until 1976 when the Mining in the Parks Act was passed. Before this, the only guidelines for mining were really the General Mining Act passed in 1872. That act was really just a reflection of the California Gold Rush and lots of new mining claims being established there. And the law really just emulated standards by the Mexican government who formerly controlled California. Once the act in 1976 was passed, 1,100 mines were still under operation in parks just due to being previously established. So we're just going to look at a few examples of natural areas where mining has occurred and the effects of there. So starting with the Grand Canyon. In the early 1900s, it was being explored, and in the 40s, 50s, 60s, uranium mining started to occur. And as uranium prices were going up, more and more mines started popping up in the Grand Canyon area. And then as uranium prices went down, they kind of just stopped as it wasn't profitable anymore. So in 2012, we officially just banned mining in the Grand Canyon National Park, so no more mining there whatsoever. But mines are still open around the surrounding areas. So those mining claims can still be used to mine, and some companies have said if uranium goes up, they will reopen those mines and start that again. So the effects of mining in the Grand Canyon, they're still relatively unknown. There's some anecdotal stories and a little bit of evidence to look at. So elevated levels of uranium were found in the Grand Canyon water supply. And that was 100% concluded to be from the mines, but what was concluded to be from the mines were tadpoles in a nearby pond next to the Canyon Mine, which is just a few miles south of the Grand Canyon. They had elevated heavy metal levels in their blood, and it was also in the pond as well, so we know that was directly from the mine. As well as the region is testing on animals and birds to see if those levels will be the same as well. The ban in 2012 was really just to help the Colorado River, and just because it's a big water supply from much of the Southwest, so they wanted to ensure as much safety there as possible. So the next one is mining in Denali National Park. So up until 1985, there were 4,000 mines in Denali, but in 1985, the National Park Service took control of those mining claims and brought it down to only around 600, which were mainly private lands before the national park was established, and they just really couldn't do much about those claims. There are no active mines in Denali as of now, but the National Park Service has to work on cleanup of previous mines. So like mentioned, how they work on the cleanup, these are some of the effects on Denali. After the mining claims were given to National Park Service in 1985, lots of the areas were left in disarray. Heavy machinery, hazardous substances, disturbed areas were all throughout the park. So they had to go and clean this up. This had impacts on the ecosystems as plants and animals were displaced or harmed and destroyed. The cleanup is still going on, and this just shows it has to take funds from what would be conservation or preservation of these parks. It just has to go to cleaning up these mines that were left over. And so that just adds to the effects that it has on Denali and other national parks. So this is an example of mining going really wrong. So in Spain, a zinc mine collapsed in 1998. Over the next few days after it collapsed, 4 million cubic meters of acidic water and 2 million cubic meters of toxic mud with lots of toxic metals was released into the Doñana National Park nearby. This park actually has 70% of all European bird species, so it is very key to some European biodiversity. There are much higher zinc levels found, which was the main mine after the spill, and that isn't really sure. We aren't really sure what biological implications that had on the animals there, but we do know it has the impact on the ecosystem, and that those levels were raised, and that is some of the impact there. So what was done to help this situation was, after the spill, to help lower the damage, a treatment center was set up in June of 1998, so only a few months later. And this just helped the estuaries from absorbing all of the metal. And the estuaries provide most of the water for the animals and plants and other species that live in these national parks. And so that really helped mitigate the effects of the spill on this park. The U.S. could look at treatment centers like this to set up in mining areas or places that have spills to help mitigate our impacts when we have accidents like this happen. So why should you help, or why should I be helping? So currently mining is trying to be expanded in parks. For example, the Grand Canyon is trying to be open for uranium mining previously in the last year or two. Luckily the Supreme Court struck that down and kept the ban in place. So mining is still not allowed in the national park. But we do know people are still trying to reopen these parks for mining, and that we still have to be aware of fights in areas where we need to stop the mining in these parks from happening. So to get involved, you can look at groups such as the National Parks Conservation Association, as well as just the latest news and keeping up on where mining is going on in the U.S. And what natural areas it's nearby. As always, you can always call your representative and just let them know your opinion on this mining and the impacts and different policies that can help protect this. Thank you.